It is a Friday episode of Locked On Grizzlies, and we have been talking about trades a lot this week. Does Memphis even need to make a deal this season? We'll talk about that. Plus, finally, some Grizzlies basketball to preview, and a little bit of past against present, a little bit of Grizz Next Gen versus Grit and Grind. Who you got? You have a sneaky suspicion who I'm going to pick. We'll talk about that and more coming up here on Locked On Grizzlies. Let's lock in.
You are Locked On Grizzlies, your daily Memphis Grizzlies podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
It is Friday. You've got to get down on Friday. As the wise philosopher Rebecca Black once said, fun. Looking forward to the weekend. It is I, Joe Mullinax, one of your hosts, joined by my co-host, Damichael Cole, and we are partying each and every time an episode drops on Locked On Grizzlies, but especially on a Friday edition of the podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by the good folks over at Robinhood. Robinhood Gold provides the privileges of a high net worth for any net worth. These generous benefits are now available for only $5 a month. The new gold standard is here with Robinhood Gold. Sign up at robinhoodgold.com/gold. We are free and available wherever you get podcasts. As proud members of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team each and every single day. Like, comment, rate, review, subscribe on Apple, Spotify, Amazon, YouTube. Become an everydayer if you haven't already done so. Be with Damichael and I each and every time that an episode drops. We have a new newsletter as well, free and daily, right sent to your inbox. Go to lockedondaily.com. Again, that is lockedondaily.com. Words from me, national words on the NBA. I'm sure they'll talk about the godforsaken NBA Cup. You have fantasy basketball, of course, that you can listen to, all sorts of different stuff. Again, lockedondaily.com. Subscribe to the newsletter. Be an everydayer there, just like hopefully you're an everydayer on Spotify, Amazon, YouTube, Apple, wherever you get podcasts. Damichael, I loved the solo show yesterday. Well done. Always fun when you get a chance to talk about Jimmy Butler, right? The wildness that is Jimmy Butler. I love the troll job, by the way, of him getting his hair dyed orange with the report that he is most interested in being with the Phoenix Suns. I agree. I don't think he makes much sense in Memphis, certainly to trade Desmond Bane for, especially since he's probably a rental, right? Almost certainly going into free agency. Mm-hmm. But I do think that it would be hilarious, right? Like there's no denying – championship or not, it would be a lot funnier. And I don't know if that's a good reason. It's probably not a good reason to make an exchange like that in the National Basketball Association, but you got to get your jokes off at some point. We've talked a lot about trades. I can't believe I'm the one bringing up this topic on a Friday. I love the trade machine, right? If you have been following my work, covering the Grizzlies for over a decade, I am the armchair GM of Grizzlies media, Twitter, whatever it is I count, whatever it is that I count in terms of whatever Damichael Cole is cooking up on social media, getting some media basketball thing together. Don't forget me, partner. Make sure that I'm involved in this, whatever you're cooking up over there on social media. But I think that we forget, or at least I forget, GG Jackson hasn't played yet. Right. Vince Williams Jr. has barely played. Zach Edey has an impending return, probably not tonight against the Nets, but it looks like the Lakers game, maybe early next week, we'll see Zach Edey back out on the floor the way the Grizzlies do their injury designations. Does Memphis even need a trade? Because we keep talking about this consolidation idea. I think there's something to that, but in order to do consolidation and maximize the value of it, it usually has to come in the offseason when teams have more roster space because contracts expire and things like that. I can't believe I'm saying this. I'm of the mind Cam Johnson's having a hell of a season, and I think that's one you seriously consider. But outside of that, I think I'm good. I don't think that I want to see a trade because we have no idea what this team looks like with GG Jackson in the fold in particular.
Yeah. The way you phrased it, I think was very important there. Do the Grizzlies need a trade? I don't think so. They right now, they're top 5 offensive rating, top 5 defensive rating. I think they're the only team that's pretty much top 5 in both, but the top 10 in a lot of other statistical categories as well that suggest that they're a great offensive and defensive unit. They have depth at point guard, at the 2, at the 3, at the 4, at the 5. So when you make trades, you're usually trying to add depth. You don't really need depth, or add some type of star power, and you could make a case for that. But the core here is young and in place. So this isn't a team that I kind of picture right now. Just unless something drastically comes to the table for them, that's unexpected. But the things that we've talked about, like Jimmy Butler, even Cam Johnson to a certain degree, would be a great addition. But at the same time, as a Atlanta Braves baseball fan, many of you, if you've watched the Atlanta Braves, Chip Carey, who is now the St. Louis Cardinals play-by-play guy, Joe, he used to always say, and some fans would get irritated by it. He used to always say that the Braves, when they would get guys back who were on the injured list for multiple weeks or multiple months or whatever the case may be, around the trade deadline or after the trade deadline, he'd say, "Oh, this is just like getting a trade deadline acquisition." So shout out to Chip Carey. But I think in the case of the guys that you mentioned, Gigi Jackson, Vince Williams, those will be like trade deadline acquisitions for this team. So I think, again, if you want to really just dive deep into it, we talked about the guys who will be free agents potentially at the end of the season. Santi Aldama entering restricted free agency. Jake LaRavia, after the team declined his option. Luke Kennard playing, on a 1-year deal. Those guys are players who right now it's possible that they're not back. And in the case of a couple of them, particularly Luke Kennard, it's hard to see him returning based on the way that things are starting to outline themselves. So maybe you make some type of move around the idea that, hey, this guy's not going to be back. Let's trade him and make a move. Like we saw the Clippers traded Luke Kennard. They were, quote unquote, still a contender at the time they traded him to Memphis. So maybe the Grizzlies go that route. You remove a little bit money, off of the luxury tax. Remember, Joe, we talked about it in the offseason. The Grizzlies have until the trade deadline is when their number, their salary cap, their financial number will be finalized. So that's a key thing to point out as well. So it's hard for me to see them kind of just adding something in and not subtracting in a way that's going to, I guess, not greatly impact some of the things that they're trying to accomplish this season. So I don't think they make some huge move. They'll probably be in some conversations, but that's as of today. I think too, I also want to say this, that you get into conversations because you don't know what happens between now and February. As weird as it sounds to say, the Grizzlies are kind of a relatively healthy team, right now. And if you run into a couple hiccups in January or whatever the case may be, you could have that in your back pocket to go add some depth.
They're certainly not in a rush. I think they've bought themselves some time in that regard, and that's a major positive. I think Cam Johnson's the line. Cam Johnson's the line for me. He's under contract the next couple of years, fits the roster a little bit better than Marcus Smart does. I think that's my line. I am intrigued by the idea of him on this roster, and I think he raises the ceiling for the Grizzlies this season. But I do believe that you take out a Luke Kennard and you sign a Cam Spencer to a full roster deal like they've done with so many other two-way contracts, and this team essentially is what it is over the next several years. I'm going to take Robert Pera at his word, and we talk about this every once in a while, Damichael. Mm-hmm. Robert Pera says eventually he's going to pay the luxury tax. The Memphis Grizzlies swear up and down that the luxury tax is going to be paid. It logically makes sense when Jaren signs this extension that is coming, and it is coming, and it is going to be substantial. Jaren Jackson Jr. deserves it.
This way,
he took a pay cut last time. He has not taken a pay cut this time around, and I understand. They're going to be in the luxury tax with 3 max deals on their roster. They're probably saving that for a year or two from now. Anything they do is going to be with the idea that they have to be as close to that luxury tax line as possible, flirting with it, but not fully going all in. That is what you need to watch. And that's another reason why the Cam Johnson, you could do Marcus Smart, Jake LaRavia, or Santi Aldama, whichever they prefer, and a first-round pick. I think that's enough for Cam Johnson. It might take a second pick, but that feels like a lot, right? Marcus Smart playing pretty well, both LaRavia and Santi doing some good things too.
Yep.
There's a window there. There's a deal that makes sense for both sides. Let Damichael and I know in the comments. Hit us up on X at Damichael C for Damichael, at Joe Mullinax for me. Does Memphis even need a trade at this point? I might put a poll on X on Friday just to get folks talking a little bit. I have a tendency to be able to do that pretty well, partner. Speaking of getting folks talking, Grit and Grind versus Grizz Next Gen. Zach and Tony have a podcast now. Jaren Jackson Jr. was a guest on this inexplicable 96 hours off in the middle of the season that most of the teams in the NBA had. And they talked about whether or not the 2012 Grizzlies could hang with the 2022 Grizzlies. Damichael and I are going to dive into that here in a moment on Locked On Grizzlies. Today's episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by Robinhood. Shout out to Robinhood. With Robinhood Gold, you don't need a silver spoon to eat up the financial favors of the 1%. Robinhood Gold allows others to get the rates and perks usually reserved for the high society. Now, the resourceful individual with Robinhood Gold can earn the very liberal rate of 4.25% APY on uninvested cash and be rewarded with a handsome 3% retirement boost on IRA account contributions. Robinhood Gold provides the privileges of a high net worth for any net worth. These generous benefits are now available for only $5 a month. The new gold standard is here with Robinhood Gold. Sign up at Robinhood.com/gold. Terms apply. For product-specific disclosures, visit Robinhood.com/gold. Investing involves risk. Rate may change. Gold membership is offered by Robinhood Gold, LLC. All right, so this podcast that Tony Allen and Zach Randolph have started, In the Mud, Out the Mud, whatever the case might be.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Solid show.
A fun listen, unsurprisingly, considering the personalities involved. Jaren Jackson Jr. was a guest recently, and the question was asked to Michael, could the 2012 Memphis Grizzlies, that was the team that, if I recall correctly, got into the Western Conference Finals, right, or in that general 2012-2013 time frame. Yep. So that group got in that mix. Who would win between that team and the 2022 Grit and Grind Grizzlies? Okay. And Jaren said it would be a gentleman's sweep. Jaren said
right in the face of Zach Randolph and Tony Allen.
Yes. And I appreciate that confidence, in all honesty. What else is he supposed to say? Oh, you guys are going to beat us. You know, he's a competitive guy. I get it. Yeah. Winning in 5 is a bit bold. Yeah. But you and I talked a little bit about this earlier on Thursday, and I think I surprised you with my answer.
You did.
I completely agree. That Western Conference Finals run, as amazing as it was, came at the hands of a wounded Oklahoma City team, right? I think it was Russell Westbrook that tore his meniscus, and he wasn't on the court for that. They were a good team, and they deserved to get where they got, and I think I even made an argument it was one of the most competitive sweeps in NBA history, which is a very biased thing to say. For people that are veterans of Locked On Grizzlies, if you're an everydayer, if you followed my career, I don't think that's the best Grizzlies team in Grizzlies history. I think the 2014-2015 team is the best team in Memphis Grizzlies history. The one with the broken Mike Conley face, the one that I firmly believe, and I know you don't agree with this, they beat the Golden State Warriors that year. They win if Mike Conley is healthy. I think those Grizzlies beat the 2022 Grizz Next Gen Grizzlies. 2015 playoff run should have been deeper. The best Grizzlies team. The reason why, and before you laugh at me, I know you're chuckling over there. Before you laugh at me, that 2015 team was a marriage of the pretty good Zach Randolph. He wasn't super Zebo anymore, but he was still pretty good. Tony Allen, still a pretty good defender, wasn't gone just yet. Mike Conley and Marc Gasol were reaching their apex. You had Mark and Mike at their best during the Grit and Grind era, and that is why that team was the best version. You had Jeff Green, you had Courtney Lee, you had all sorts of depth, similar to the depth that the Grizzlies have, but it was veteran depth. Give me the 2014-2015 Memphis Grizzlies in 6 against the 2022 Grizzlies, Grizz Next Gen.
Uh, I actually think it's a like Jaren was confident. 4-1 gentleman's sweep. I think if you listen to the podcast, he said, "Oh, we'd go up 3-0 and they'd win one and then they'd come back and close it out after that."
He was very condescending in his confidence.
I mean, you should, like, Tony Allen had a couple words he had said after that when Jaren gave his prediction. But I mean, it's really tough for me. I think it goes pretty much 7 games, and 2, I think it's very ugly. Like, I think it's an ugly series. I think we don't see 100 points probably once or twice. And my reason is kind of counter to what you just said. It seems like you have more confidence in the 2015 squad because of the fact that the team was starting to shift more towards Mike Conley and Marc Gasol, ascending into the next level of their careers. What if I say the reason that I like 2012 better, their chances against, the 2022 Grizzlies, because of the fact that you had the best of Tony Allen and the best of Zach Randolph? I think those are the problems, for that potential series. I think the fact that you can put Tony Allen on Ja Morant and say, hey, Ja, we're gonna make this extreme. We know you're gonna get yours from time to time, but ain't nothing coming easy. I think the fact that you can give the ball to Z-Bo, and we're talking about the 2022 Grizzlies. We ain't talking about this Jaren version right now who stayed out of foul trouble. 2022 Jaren, you have to, hope and pray that he wouldn't be in foul trouble. And same thing with Dillon Brooks. I think that year Dillon Brooks and Jaren were both like near the top of the NBA. No, I know for sure they were. Both were near the top of the NBA in fouls per game. So what was different is that team had some depth. You had some guys like DeAnthony Melton, Kyle Anderson, Tyus Jones. That's kind of where I lean the advantage towards the 2022 squad. So I agree with you on the pick, but I just got to show some love to the 2012 squad because I definitely think it ain't easy. I really think it's almost a toss-up between those two teams. Look, you're in love with 2015, and I get it. 2015 team was also really good. The Grizzlies have had there are a couple other teams as well, just in that time frame, that had really good seasons that could kind of make a case for giving that 2022 team the best run. But I will say this as well, and not to get too sidetracked here, but the way this edition of the Grizzlies are currently playing, we'll see how it translates to the playoffs. But this might be the squad that has the best chance of knocking out any of the teams that we've talked about.
The pace thing is important, right? Because the old school Grizzlies, the grit and grind Grizzlies, they were emphasizing grit and grind, right? Like they were trying to slow the game down.
Wear you down.
Major focus would be who's able to control the pace. Right. And I do think that the low post play of Z-Bo, whether it was in 2012 or 2015, would have created some issues for that 2022 group.
Yeah.
I don't see that ending well for 2022 Jaren. 2024 Jaren, maybe. I think there might be something going well there. I think it's a fun question. I love these hypotheticals, and everybody knows that follows Locked On Grizzlies. I love the grit and grind era. That's when I became a fan. Yeah. I moved to Memphis in 2011, made the connection with the team through grit and grind. I have a soft spot in my heart for that group of guys, but it's important to understand Ja Morant is the best player in the history of the Memphis Grizzlies.
Oh, yeah.
I think that Jaren Jackson Jr. is pretty close to being number 2. Right? If he's not already there, there's probably an argument, maybe a future episode of Locked On Grizzlies. Is Jaren already the second best player in Grizzlies history? I think Mark has something to say about that because of his accolades and the way that he played, but it's close. Yeah. It's not a blowout anymore. Jaren's in that mix. I think that it's really a fascinating thing. As much as I loved grit and grind, the talent level for this group is just so much higher. Like Desmond Bane being your third best player, the third best player on that 2015 team would have been Zach Randolph more than likely. No disrespect to Z-Bo. It's not a contest, right? Like it's a very different, there's levels to this. But as you mentioned earlier, in a 7-game series where things can change, pace can slow down, anything's possible. And that 2015 Grizzlies team, I'll never forgive. I think it was CJ McCollum. I'll never forgive him for breaking Mike Conley's face. completely ruined that run. No one will ever be able to convince me that team was not going to make the NBA Finals. You don't have a chance. They were going to beat the Warriors. They were going to get there. Curse you, CJ McCollum. When we come back here on Locked On Grizzlies, we're going to finish out this episode of the show previewing actual Grizzlies basketball. They play the Nets tonight. They play the Lakers on Sunday in a rare one-game road trip out west. Talking about both of those games and more coming up next here on Locked On Grizzlies. Today's episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything that you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you think the Commanders are going to blow out the New Orleans Saints this weekend, you want to make that wager, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same exact page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the National Football League. We close out today's episode talking about actual Grizzlies basketball. As I mentioned earlier, the Grizzlies play the Nets tonight. Cam Johnson, the aforementioned Cam Johnson, rolling through Memphis this evening. You get to see him live and in person there, Damichael Cole. Yeah. And then the team heads out to Los Angeles for, again, the inexplicable one-game West Coast trip in the wake of the nonsense that is the NBA Cup. And it's interesting what's going on with the Lakers right now. I don't want to skip the Nets. We can talk about them for sure. The Grizzlies have some unfinished business with the Nets this season. The two games that were picked by the NBA are kind of interesting in that way. But LeBron James hasn't played much. And again, there's been rumors of LeBron being traded to Golden State, or Golden State should trade for LeBron and all this kind of nonsense. I don't think that's ever going to happen. But the Lakers seem to be imploding a little bit, fading into the ether that is the play-in conversation. The Nets are being more successful than they thought they would be. So what I'm most interested by this weekend is the fact that it's two teams that are very different, trying to go in different directions, but are actually in the same place in their respective conferences.
To me, it's a simple battle of risk versus rust for the Grizzlies here, because this is a situation where you go back to Monday before the NBA Cup games started and all that. The Grizzlies played 25 games, more than any team in the Western Conference. Now, the Rockets, the Mavs, Thunders, those teams have played some games here to catch up with them. But they needed this break. I mean, they literally, the last two games they played were on a back-to-back. But at the same time, this is the best basketball we've seen the Grizzlies play this season. They're starting to really figure out things in this new offense, right? Players are getting healthy. Roles are starting to be kind of determined a little bit more. And I was actually talking to Taylor Jenkins about this a couple of days ago, like asking him, hey, does he have a better idea now with the sample size of who plays well with who? And he talked about that a little bit as well. But yeah, I think we'll see if this team can pretty much just pick up where it left off. Playing really good basketball on the offensive end, sound defensively, and really, putting it on teams, the way they have in recent games. That's what it's going to be for me, the rest versus rust component. Then there's some other things as well, especially with Zach Edey being upgraded on the injury report to doubtful. So probably unlikely against the Nets, a little bit more likely against the Lakers. And Joe, we've talked about a bunch of Lakers-Grizzlies games up to this point. And I feel like every time the Grizzlies lose, we always point to physicality in some type of way. So getting a big guy like that back could potentially be beneficial if he's back for that game. If not, then Golden State after that, same thing.
If we're subscribing to the idea that Desmond Bane has been banged up and just playing through it because of the kind of player he is, the kind of leader he is, nobody needed the time off more than him. I'm curious to see how he bounces back, first against Brooklyn at home, and then, of course, that Lakers game that everybody on that Grizzlies roster is going to get up for. That's a budding rivalry there between the Grizzlies and the Lakers. Don't be surprised if LeBron James makes his return to Los Angeles in that lineup, wanting to take on the young Bull Grizzlies, maybe a little get-right opportunity for him. I want to see Desmond Bane bounce back. I want to see him be engaged. I want to see him not just offensively find a shooting stroke, but also defensively, right? He would be making some pretty big errors, uncharacteristic errors. I want to stress that, things that we're not used to seeing him do in terms of fouls, in terms of missing assignments. I want to see, hopefully this time away cleared Bane's brain and he has a chance to get back to being the Dez that we know he is. With Jaren and Ja, this new system, there's all sorts of reasons that maybe the numbers aren't quite what they once were, but his efficiency, his ability to defend, getting that back up to the levels that we come to know and love from Desmond Bane, that's going to be key for me. Let Damichael and I know in the comments. Hit us up on X at Damichael C, at Joe Mullinax. What are you looking forward to this weekend? Or are you just simply looking forward to the fact that the Grizzlies are actually playing basketball again?
So they got to
I know that I'm excited about that.
They got to slow down Dennis Schroeder too, right? Like he's
been giving him pretty good.
He's been giving them the business. I'm like, this Nets game. It's a good thing for them because they can't overlook the Nets anymore. Like, not saying that they were in either of those two games, but you don't want to lose 3 times to a team.
Yeah, and especially to a team that's not actively trying to win.
Yeah. And a team that has one of your old teammates in Zaire Williams for a lot of these guys. So you talk about bragging rights. They're giving him bragging rights right now. So looking forward to seeing that. We've talked a lot about, Jalen Wells and his growth on the defensive end, right? And then now you have a healthier Marcus Smart. So you have options, starting lineup, reserves to throw at Dennis Schroeder constantly throughout the game. I think that's going to be a key point for them. They know how good of a shooter Cam Johnson is. I remember the game in Memphis, the last game in Memphis when the Nets played here. Anytime he got a decent look, you could see the players who were at the scores table, the way they would react was it was clear that a focal point in Scout was don't let him, get much space. So, they're going to emphasize that. We'll see what the results look like. But, yeah, looking forward to that as well. And then, with the Lakers one, it's just always fun seeing the Grizzlies and the Lakers because I think you're right, with the fact that earlier this season when the Grizzlies played the Lakers, they were kind of on their high horse a little bit. The Lakers, they hadn't lost at home, and JJ Redick was still in his what do you call it, like the honeymoon phase maybe.
JJ Redick was a wonderkind. Yeah, he was the greatest coach in the histrry of basketball there for a couple weeks. And
then they realized his numbers looked exactly like Darvin Ham's, and it was like, oh snap, blame Rob Pelinka now. So, but anyways, the point here is the Lakers have kind of fell off a little bit. You mentioned the thing with LeBron. We'll see if he's active. Obviously, that's going to be a big piece. But, looking forward to that matchup as well.
Should be a fun weekend of Grizzlies basketball. Make sure you're checking it out. Make sure you're with us here on Locked On Grizzlies on our Monday edition of the show, recapping and reviewing everything that happened in Grizzlies Nets and Grizzlies Lakers, and maybe talking about a returning Zach Edey and all those fun things. Make sure you're liking, commenting, rating, reviewing, subscribing. Wherever you get podcasts, check us out on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, Amazon. Make sure you're subscribing and being a part of the Locked On Daily free daily newsletter as well. Get Locked On Grizzlies sent to your your inbox on your email, in addition to wherever you get us audio, visual. Make us a part of your Memphis Grizzlies and NBA content consumption each and every way that you possibly can. For the great Damichael Cole, I am Joe Mullinax. Stay locked in. Have a wonderful weekend watching Grizzlies basketball. It's nice to be able to say that again. Check us out on Monday. Until then, be safe, and we'll catch you later.